Thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful day, beautiful Saturday where it's not quite so cold, so it actually makes it nice to get out, I suppose. And happy National School Choice Week, everybody! My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Communications Director at the Heartland Institute, and we are streaming this live on our YouTube channel, and so we're very excited about that. So if you'd like to see this again after you go home and see all the presentations once again, it'll be auto-archived on Heartland's YouTube page, where we'll be able to see that, and there'll be people joining us. Hello, everyone. Live around the world through our YouTube feed. I'm not going to be the host of this event, though. There's going to be other people speaking up here. And the person who put this event together for us is Lenny Jarrett. He is our director, or our project manager for school choice here at the Heartland Institute. So please welcome Lenny Jarrett.
Just want to welcome everybody again and welcome everybody watching online. Real quick things here. The Heartland Institute is a 501c3 think tank. We are a national organization, but we actually focus on state issues for the most part. We have 4 newspapers that is actually mailed to every elected official, state elected official in the country every single month. School reform news, environment and climate news, healthcare news, and budget and tax news. On the table over here to the left is a sampling of all of our materials. You're free to grab a bag and pick up whatever you want. Also, if you have a group and you're interested in having a speaker from Heartland, let me know. My cards are on the table. Just email me, contact me, call me, and we'll set up arranging for speakers and stuff. And we're always also distributing information. And if you're interested, I have a sheet, which I can make more copies for each of you. If you want literature to distribute, just let me know, and we'll be happy to help you distribute literature and give you some of the Heartland publications so you'll be able to see what's over there. So thank you for everybody for coming. We'll have our speakers coming up here in a minute, but I want to give a few quick remarks. This year for National School Choice Week, there are over 16,000 events around the country this week. We have 918 in Illinois. Illinois had the number 4 most events this year. So you can see the growth in people wanting school choice. And a quick information, you may not know, Illinois actually has over 300,000 people that take advantage of personal tax credit, which is one form of school choice. It's very limited, but it is a form of school choice. So you can see that Illinois residents are interested. Their parents want options for their kids. So before we get started with Tom Morrison, we know every child deserves access to a quality education, and I'm going to introduce State Representative Tom Morrison. He's been a longtime friend of the Heartland Institute. He actually got redistricted out. He's not actually the rep for the building, but he has been around education and school choice. His parents actually helped found Christian Liberty Academy. And Tom will represent and run the rest of the program. So Tom, if you'd like to come on up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lenny. All right, thanks to all of you who are here and those of you who are watching. I'm just very grateful for the Heartland Institute. As a state legislator, I get hit with all kinds of issues, and it's helpful to have an organization like this one with experts on staff that provide us with needed information. It also gives us an opportunity to look at what's happening around the country with the other 50 state or 49 state legislatures out there. Last summer, or I guess it was now 2 summers ago, I went to a conference and heard a presentation by the Friedman Foundation for Education Choice. I know an organization that is very much in line with what Heartland is doing. And I was so energized, so excited to hear what some of my colleagues in other parts of the country were doing in their own state legislatures. Again, providing young people, providing parents with greater choice. And what I gleaned from that is just when parents see a chance to be more involved with their students, with their children, they get more engaged. They get very excited. And as a former school teacher myself, I taught 5th grade for 6 years. In many, many cases, those young people, those students under my charge, if their parents were engaged and involved, that student, the likelihood that they would succeed was far, far greater. And so I see school choice as an opportunity for parents to be more involved, to be engaged with their children. I see this as a win-win, and I continue to try to advocate for this down in the Illinois legislature in Springfield. And I'm just grateful for all that you do, and I'm really looking forward to what our expert panel has to say. Lastly, what I want to say about Illinois is our fiscal problems are well known, but our new governor represents a dramatic shift in what is possible for Illinois. And while I might have some disagreements with him on one policy or another, one reason why I support him and why I supported him as a candidate was because he puts his money where his mouth is. And long before he was a candidate for governor, was with his own money funding scholarships, trying to give people in lower economic areas in the city of Chicago and in Illinois and around the Midwest to give those families options and choices. And I believe that he will continue to do that as governor. One of his appointments was former Senator James Meeks. He made former Senator James Meeks the chairman of the Illinois State Board of Education. James Meeks, when he was in the state Senate, pushed very hard for a voucher bill that passed the Senate and came up just a little bit short in the House. That was a little bit before I got sworn in. So I think that's significant. And then lastly, what I'm going to say is one of the bills that I've introduced, I'm going to continue to advocate for it, is education savings accounts. And I'm really excited to see what other states are doing. And I think it's time that Illinois had an account like that. Our grade in terms of school choice friendliness, we got a C+ last year. And in states around us like Wisconsin and Indiana, they were just a little bit higher than we are. So we definitely have room for improvement. But anyway, thanks again for coming today. I hope that this is a worthwhile forum for you. With that, I wanted to bring up a friend, Bruno Bernd, if you are ready. And as Bruno comes up, I'd like to just give his background real quick. Bruno is a senior fellow for education policy here at the Heartland Institute. He's a co-author with Joe Bast of the book called The Parent Trigger, a model for transforming education. In 2009, Bernd served as the policy director and strategist for a gubernatorial candidate in the Illinois primary election. In 2008, he co-authored a book, Illinois Deserves Better, the ironclad case for an Illinois Constitutional Convention. And he's also served as an advisor to various groups seeking to rewrite the legislative article of the Illinois Constitution. So with that, please welcome Bruno Bernd.
Hey everybody, how you doing today? Good, excellent. So how many people have seen one of my presentations at one point in time before in the past? A lot of hands are going up, a few people. So quiz question, because this will be on the test. What are the 4 words that encapsulate everything you could possibly want to know about school choice? Anybody? Fun children, not close. Programs is good. So you get a partial demerit. Fun children, not systems. Fun children, not districts. That is, in a nutshell, what school choice is. And if you ever are in a debate or an argument on this, it's people can they use all kinds of words and they say, well, you're going to drain money from my school district, or you're going to do this, or you're going to do that. If you're ever in a debate with anybody, you can always come back to home base. And home base is, don't you think we should fund children and not systems? And the statistics on this stuff, there's test scores, there's all kinds of different things, and you can debate this stuff back and forth. It's a valid debate. And our opponents have 1 or 2 points, which are quite frankly easily addressed, but they do have points. But the fact of the matter is, just in the last 20, 30 years, we've seen a massive run-up in education funding. The idea that there's not enough money in education is such a specious argument that it really doesn't even bear debate. And the fact of the matter is that they have dumped an incredible amount of that money into managing these entities called school districts, loading them up with administration, loading them up with 85% of their costs are generally staff and salaries. And so should we pay teachers more? That's a debatable issue. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But don't ever let anybody tell you that it's about money or you're taking money from my school district. It's just really simple. Fund children and not systems. So, what I want to do here really quickly is kind of talk a little bit about some of the shifting ground that's happening under everything here today, and kind of maybe give you a little bit of cause for concern and a little bit of cause for hope in what the future may hold. Tom is right, Representative Morrison is right. There's some positive developments. I think more and more people are starting to question the system. I think The top-down centralization of the Common Core is going to bring a lot more people questioning whether a centralized system for 52 million of probably the most economically, ethnically, and regionally diverse people on the planet should all be shoved into one giant curriculum for the richest and most complex nation in the world. So I want to give you an idea about how to think about things. And what I want you to do while you're thinking about education and all the different reforms that can be done and all the different potential pieces of legislation is also maybe think beyond that and say, well, maybe we should rethink the entire thing. Give you some really quick examples. A bunch of people from a nonprofit with computers, they dropped off, they went to an Ethiopian village with very little running water and very little electricity up in the hills of Ethiopia somewhere. And they dropped off a bunch of hardwired laptops that were, or tablets that were not connected to the internet at all. All they had on them was some education reading software. And the kids tore open the boxes, they told the adults how to recharge them. They came back 3 months later and every kid in the village had taught himself to read by these tablets. No schoolhouse, no teacher, no nothing. Khan Academy, anybody seen Khan Academy? Essentially every thing you could want from a curriculum, from all the way from 1 + 1 = 2 to quantum mechanics in 10-minute videos that you can watch online, take a quiz. And amazingly enough, Khan Academy has something called the dashboard, which marks what you've learned and what you haven't learned, and what you can kind of like fill in your dashboard. So you start off with at age 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 with a little dashboard over here that says you've gotten some addition. By the time you're into high school, you could have a completely filled dashboard that says you've learned quantum mechanics or economics or some other kind of thing. And this is all in 10-minute videos. And it's free. They didn't have to hire 1 million curriculum coordinators to write it. They didn't have to run it through a district bureaucracy. This is the kind of stuff that you need to start thinking about. So, yes, we do need to have good legislators put together good bills where we can slowly but surely begin the process of, and yes, I'm going to say these words and I'm unapologetic for them, we can begin the process of dismantling the public district structure. We have a booth over here from classical, I wrote it down, Classical Conversations. It's curriculum. There was a Wall Street Journal editorial a few months ago by Sandra Day O'Connor. She and former Senator John Glenn met one day and they were concerned about people not understanding civics in the United States of America, so they wrote a civics curriculum. And now it's being used in a few high schools and colleges across the country, and they're literally selling this civics curriculum, which a former senator and a former Supreme Court justice probably can outperform the dross that you read in Pearson products. So this is the way to think about this. Pretty much the sum of human knowledge can be delivered to us on our computers, in loose leaf textbooks, in pamphlets, in PDFs, and on our cell phones. And yet it makes you stop and think, or it should make you stop and think. Do we really need to, quote unquote, save or reform or fix a 19th century system that was essentially devised because we had an agrarian society where people had to take 3 months off in the summer to farm fields? I think farmers are now, what, 2% of the population, if that? And yet we're still sticking with the system. And parents across the country would love to have a system that actually had different school hours and longer interim vacations, but shorter summer vacations. But instead, we have a system where people cram all this stuff into 180 days, and then they forget a third of it over the summer, and then they have to do the first 2 or 3 months of remediation to remember what they forgot over the 3 months. It's insane. So as we think about all this, let's stop thinking that we have to, quote unquote, fix this system, and let's just transcend it. And, if it comes to definition, I mean, I think everybody in this room knows what a voucher is. Is there anybody in this room who doesn't know what a voucher is? That's going to be on the test too. Lenny mentioned tuition tax credits. Here in Illinois, you get a $500 tax credit. Just raising that to $1,000 would help people defray the costs of either home education or private education, or paying for some extra, some supplemental education. That would help. I'm a big fan of charter schools. There are some people who say, well, charters aren't the answer because they're public. Charters are independent infrastructure, and they're a good idea. And no, they're not perfect. There's studies that show that there's some poorly run charters that have poor results. Guess what? They close. It's too bad we can't close district schools that don't educate. Wouldn't that be nice? I've mentioned Khan. iTunes University. You can go to iTunes and take some of the best college courses in the world. And I'm going to pat myself on the back here. Not everybody can be an autodidactic polymath like I am. So yes, you're going to need to have a brick and mortar system somewhere for somebody to use a chalkboard and a tutor and a teacher and somebody who can convey content. But it doesn't have to be inside this one-size-fits-all system. And we never should have gone that route. So there's online learning, there's all these different things. What I really want to do here is say, yes, if you have an opportunity, you should promote all of the different things that Heartland talks about. We need more charter schools. We need more digital learning. We had a bill that had cyber charters, and then they shut that one down. Cyber charter would be something that was a public charter school, but you can learn online. They have, in Wisconsin, it's actually fairly well used, and they do pretty well. Every single option you can think of, the answer should be yes. And then let's see if you can't do this. Somebody else has to answer this. So, did anybody remember my elevator close? You know what an elevator close is? You get on an elevator and you're trying to raise some money, and you're going down the elevator with a bunch of people who might have money to invest in your idea. So you have to close them on investing in your idea in the 30 seconds or 45 seconds you're in the elevator. That's called an elevator close. So you got 30 seconds to pitch somebody. And the 30-second pitch for dramatic expansion of choice is that we have a 19th century education system that costs too much to manage and is controlled by way too many entrenched interests that are all about keeping the money inside the system and not about actually educating children. And we want to skip the 20th century and go right to the 21st century education system, and that system should be as follows. We need to have the money follow the child to a vast new array of independent education providers. That's the 30-second close. It's basically a slightly longer version of Fund Children, Not Systems. But if you start saying that to people, if you start working on that elevator close and putting it into your own words, people will start nodding their heads and going, yeah, we're for that. And here's what I think will happen. A few years ago, about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I was thinking, okay, the legislative route is what's going to work. You know, sooner or later, there's vouchers in North Carolina now, and they've had vouchers in Florida for a while, but the Supreme Court of Florida overturned the vouchers for everybody, and they're only for a small segment of kids in special needs or something. They have special needs vouchers in Oklahoma. Vouchers have been around for a long time in Wisconsin, and they've expanded. So there's some nice progress that has been made on the legislative front. On the other hand, they just passed education savings accounts, which are essentially a voucher, like a voucher, but they put the money in your account, and then you can go and use it for your child at various different education institutions or providers. Most people would pick a school. Somebody might pick independent, education providers. But now that one's being challenged in court. Vouchers lost. A school district decided to go for vouchers in Colorado, and that lost in the Supreme Court of Colorado, using what I would consider specious arguments on the part of the Supreme Court. But they voted that way. So everywhere you go, choice is under attack, primarily because, and let's be honest about this, it's a political debate. If this was a scientific debate about what's best for the child, we would have had all kinds of different things. All these ideas that people think are controversial. Vouchers, that's controversial. No, there's nothing controversial about a voucher. You have a district system over here where they throw piles and piles of money into a zip code-based system, where rich people get to practice education apartheid by moving out of the city in bad neighborhoods, and the poor people and the disadvantaged people are stuck in the worst schools. And, you know, that's a system, and you can advocate for that. But here's another system. Let's see what happens when we give kids money and they can and that money follows the child to the school of their choice. That's controversial because it might take money away from the districts. Well, I think it's time our side trying to say, yes, that's the idea. See, we should be funding children, not districts. And say that unapologetically instead of trying to pretend that you're like, oh, well, that's not really what we're trying to do. Yeah, what we're trying to do is have money follow the child. But in closing on this kind of stuff, I have over the last year or so come to the conclusion that maybe the legislative route is going to get overrun by the disruptive route. And essentially what I advocate for now, and I advocate for education savings accounts as something that should be tried. I advocate for, gosh, there should be charter schools. There's data that shows that charter schools are a good idea. And every single thing that you can think of under the sun that has been legislated, I'm for it. I think it's a good idea. And I'll discuss it and debate it with anybody who disagrees. But I think what might be happening, what I think might be coming, and this is what I hope for, is that somebody comes along and disrupts the entire system. I want to do to the school district what Uber did to the cab cartels, okay? We have an education cartel in this country, and I want to do to the education cartel what Uber did to the cab cartels. I want to do to the districts what Priceline did to travel agents. I have nothing against travel agents, but I like Priceline and all the other websites much better. They work for me. I get flights cheaper and faster, and there's plenty of people to go out and help with all that kind of stuff too. And I think what might be happening is we might be getting a disruptive route that's emerging, and that's because you've got curriculum like this. You've got the Common Core. You've got Common Core tests. You've got people who might not like the Common Core. They might want something new. You've got Sandra Day O'Connor's curriculum. The fact of the matter is, sooner or later, someone is going to develop a learning management system and an app that just circumvents the entire process. And all you need is 10, 15, 20% of the people to start using that process, and all of a sudden the legislation will become secondary because everyone's going to be leaving the system. Just imagine a future. You've all heard the joke, you know, what if they gave a war and nobody came? What if they gave a bloated district with a one-size-fits-all curriculum that was substandard and nobody came? Or fewer and fewer people came because they actually had an alternative. And that's real choice. That's when you can take your phone and your app and your computer and you can pick the education for your child from the smorgasbord of stuff that's falling out of the sky for free, instead of having this brick and, I call it brick and Mordor. For those Lord of the Rings fans out there, this brick and Mordor system. So on that note, God bless National School Choice Week. God bless school choice, and just keep on fighting for the choice where we do what? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bruno, thank you very much. Remember, if you have questions for our speakers, write them down now so you don't forget. You've got cards and pens at your tables. Coming up next, we have Sister Mary Paul McCoggy. Sister Mary Paul is a member of the Dominican Sisters of Springfield. She has served Catholic education as an elementary and high school teacher, secondary principal, and president and superintendent. From 2008 to 2014, she was superintendent of the Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic Schools, which is the largest Catholic school system in the United States, with nearly 85,000 students and more than 7,000 educators among 244 elementary and high schools. Prior to her role as superintendent, Sister Mary Paul served Marian Catholic High School in Chicago Heights as president and principal from 1992 to 2008. So please come on up and give a warm welcome to Sister Mary Paul.
Well, thank you, Tom, and great to see you all. I'm actually now the Archbishop's delegate for school advancement and advocacy. It fits on a card, barely. But that basically means we have a $350 million, geez, which was $350 million campaign, the bulk of which is going to school scholarships in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So working on that, and also the advocacy piece is basically trying to see if we can get school choice in Illinois. And so I'm deeply committed to it, but I'm deeply committed too to understanding that private schools have a public good. There is a private school that has a public good. We know that our private schools, and I can speak to the Catholic schools because they're what I know best, that we have a deep commitment to neighborhoods, to families, to people, to communities, and that we can have impact on those communities. Whether it's taking someone, a child of great privilege, and being able to say to them, you know, you're responsible for other people in terms of lives of love and service and strong citizenship and engagement and involvement. Or taking a young person of color and being able to prove that if you are an African American or Latino male in the city of Chicago, you are twice as likely, sometimes say 3 times as likely, to graduate from high school if you attend a Catholic elementary school. Our graduation rates for minority males is actually 95% in our high schools. Of those kids, 96% go on to college. Those are tremendous numbers. And we have studies from the University of Notre Dame, especially a book I'd refer you to, Lost Classrooms, Lost Communities, which basically says you lose a Catholic school in a neighborhood and the violence goes up. The violence and the poverty goes up. And that they're not replaceable. So we have some research, but we also have a commitment to justice, a justice that across the state, that we're not just about small changes. We really are about the changes that would speak to parishioners, to the general public across the state of Illinois. So we believe our tradition says that it is the primary right of a parent to educate their child. Okay? That it is a right and a responsibility to educate your child. And because it is, we don't do that alone. We do that surrounded by those that care about us. Who is going to care about us? Whose are these children anyway? And for years, the Archdiocese of Chicago, which is all of Cook and all of Lake County, has said we're going to try to make this any child that tries to come to us. Any color, any size, any type of kid. Now, there are challenges to that, and we haven't truthfully always done it perfectly. But it has called for the kind of creativity that Bruno has challenged us for, and it actually has tried to make us take a look at a curriculum that is perhaps narrower than some would want, but I would like to think classic in the very best sense. We get nothing tangible and fiscal out of running schools. In fact, the Archdiocese of Chicago spends $40 million educating its young people every year out of the coffers of its parishes, its pastoral centers, its donors. So why the heck are we in a business that costs that much to sustain? And we're in it because it's the right thing to do, and we love our parents. And these children are the face of God. So we have a willingness to serve that is actually tied intensely to our mission, to a mission of human dignity, and believe that however we base it and whatever happens with regard to school choice legislation, that the faith of our schools and the intensity of that mission has a right to exist and to continue. Do we have a capacity to partner? I believe we do. We have a capacity to partner even with public school districts, with charters. We have a capacity to with the Lutherans, the Jews, everybody that cares. We do. We have a capacity to say, we believe in the dignity of this child, and we do believe the money should follow that child. to whatever is the best education for that young person. Our preferred legislation actually is some of the ones that are found in Arizona, Ohio, and Arizona, and now most recently even in Indiana, to take a look at scholarship granting organizations. I like them for two reasons. The first, most of these have withstood a test of constitutionality. That's important for us to be able to do it. It also has a tremendous growth ability. In poor little Florida, where they started these scholarship granting organizations, I believe they started with $25 million. Now, anybody that knows Florida knows those old folks really don't want to pay taxes much. And the flood of Illinois into Florida and Arizona is well documented. That particular program is now $450 million a year. And it'll probably face another court challenge, but it is growing because of its popularity, because of its impact, and it is our really preferred legislation. It also says that a student applies to a school and is admitted by that school and then goes to get the scholarship from the scholarship granting organization. We think there's a beauty in that. It's a little bit more private money to private money, and it seems to be able to be withheld. Would we like to open our classrooms? Yes. We did a study at the bequest of the superintendent of schools, mayor of Chicago, and beyond, just to see how many available seats would there be in existing schools to which we can prove academic excellence. Thousands of schools, 4,200 alone in Lake County, more in the city and in the collar. So we would instantly be able, should parents choose to send their kids to a Catholic school, to open up these seats in existing classrooms, which would be, frankly, our preference to be able to hold mission and to hold tight to what our mission is, to be able to admit the child and be able to then ask that parent to apply for these scholarships. Would we like to open our schools to more people? The answer is yeah, and especially special needs kids. That's where I think we take a big hit, is not being able to be inclusive as we would love and like to be. But the cost of special education, even with a ton of creativity, and we have totally deaf kids, we have autistic kids, we have Down syndrome kids in our schools, but they can't take all that want to come. It is an expensive proposition to provide special services, even within the confines of limited physical buildings, if that's how you do it. We do believe in some physical buildings simply because we do learn as a community and not just an online community. But opening up our schools, but more than opening our schools, opening our hearts, is really what I think is the goal of school choice for me. It's to tell a parent and to tell a student, and frankly, not just those without any means, but also working class parents with multiple children, to say to them, you are welcome, this is your home, and we are going to teach you the best we know how, because we know that if you are able to read by the end of third grade, you are 8 times more likely not to be dead or in jail. We know that if we can teach you algebra in 7th grade, that you have a chance of completing college. And we can do this, and we want to. Help us, give us that choice. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Again, write your questions down. Our next speaker is former Congressman Joe Walsh, and now radio host on AM 560, The Answer, which you can also listen to online for those of you who are watching nationwide. I was actually a guest on Joe's show yesterday. We were talking about legislation that I filed dealing with a school issue, I'll just put it that way, that has really upset quite a few parents and students. And because I'm a legislator that tries to advance good ideas, I try to advance my legislation. I talk to people on the other side of the aisle. So I've reached out to several Democrat state reps and senators and what have you. And when this topic came up, I was talking with a Democrat lawmaker, and her answer was just simply, why don't we just have vouchers? So that was her solution. She said, and as I was telling we have a newspaper reporter here, there are a host of reasons why parents or students would want choice. It's not just about academics. It's not just about the crime or gang problems that might exist in one area or another. It's not just about one school has a better athletic program or a better arts program. There are a host of reasons why parents or students would want an expanded choice rather than just a school that is in their immediate neighborhood. And so for that reason, that's why we are advancing this cause. Again, we have wide support across party lines and across socioeconomic lines, regional lines. Anyway, with that, let's bring up Congressman Joe Walsh, former Congressman Joe Walsh.
Hey, Lenny, I'm assuming I have to stand behind this, right? Yeah, I will. It's going to be difficult for me, but you know me, I like to move. That's the toughest part about doing radio. I got to tell you, I stand, I don't sit when I do radio, and I stand in a little box. And one day, somebody's going to have to come up with a mic, hi, Madeline, where I can move around my studio, because I tend to throw things and kick things. And hey, it's great to be here. Many people, in fact, I bet almost everybody in this room right now does not know that I worked for the Heartland Institute 22 years ago. 22 years ago, I worked with the Heartland Institute. We were in, the office actually was in Arlington Heights, and then we moved downtown, and now we're back outside of that city of Chicago, which is always a good thing. We're still in Cook County, though. We got to do something about that, Lenny. Let's get out of Cook County. Hey, look, I get so fired up about this issue. 60, 70, 80% of blacks in America support school choice. 70, 80, 90% of Latinos in America support school choice. Almost all parents in urban areas in this country support school choice. And yet we don't have it. I'll tell you what, I spend so much of my time on the radio jumping all over our Republican Party, because our Republican Party is so feckless at times and silly at times and stupid at times. We've had this issue of school choice in front of the Republican Party for years. And it's an issue the Republicans just have simply not grabbed, and they ought to. I tend to agree with Bruno that when it comes to education in this country, I think when it comes to politics in this country, the disruptive forces are upon us. I don't know what you think of Trump. And maybe history will record Donald Trump as just an accidental footnote. But there's a disruption going on in America right now. The Republican Party is being disrupted. So many institutions that we have cherished for years are being disrupted. Education is being disrupted. Look, I always played a game with myself. I play a lot of games with myself. Before I went to Congress, I always played this game that if I were king of America, what would I do? If I were king of America, what would I do? And that's a difficult thing to talk about right now because we have a president who's acted like a king. But if I were king of America, I would do three things. I would blow up the IRS tomorrow. I would allow Americans to save for their own retirement. And I would allow every parent in this country to decide where their child goes to school. Public, private, religious, or home. Now, I tend to believe that out of those three reforms, on my wish list as king, I think allowing every parent in this country to choose where their child goes to school would be the most dramatic and would have the most impact on this country. Because, back up with me for a moment. Everybody in this room, outside of education, I'll bet, and I recognize so many of these faces in here, Everybody in this room understands right now that America is in trouble. Everybody understands right now that there's something amiss. There's something wrong. I say on the radio every day, white, black, or brown, man, this ain't the country we grew up in. White, black, or brown, this is not the country I read about. Something's going on. White, black, or brown, this is not the country we were given. You know what? About 90% of America feels that way. And then what we do is we naturally jump on our politicians. Obama, Nancy Reid, Mitch McConnell. We naturally blame our politicians, as we should. But we don't blame ourselves for where America is at. As a country, we have way too many people in this country who are not educated. I'm a bit more crude on the radio, right? We've grown fat, lazy, and stupid. But what does that mean? At its core, that means we have way too many people in this country who are not sufficiently educated enough to understand that freedom is a better proposition than a big old government that tries to take care of all of us. If you could allow every parent to choose where their child goes to school, that is fundamentally the quickest way to improve the education that our kids get. We're all with Bruno. Screw the system. Who cares about the system? We're talking about the children. You want to improve how educated American children are, white, black, and brown. The absolute quickest way to do that is to let a parent decide where that child goes to school. It's why, and by the way, everybody knows this, giving that parent that power, giving that parent that ability, giving that parent that freedom, that is the quickest way for that child to get educated. Everybody knows that. Our opponents know that. The teachers' union knows that. Which is why the teachers' union, they're okay with charter schools, I guess. They're okay with public school choice, okay. Online education, magnet schools, okay, we'll deal with this stuff, but don't you dare give us vouchers. We know that. I hear that. They tell me that. The teachers' union is afraid of only one thing. It's not charter schools. It's not magnet schools. The teachers' union is scared to death of allowing a parent to get out. They've told me that to my face. And the word they use, we love the word they use. The word they use is so telling. The word they use is so illuminating. Members of the teachers union have told me, you've read about this, we cannot let those kids escape. They've said that to my face. I cannot let that child escape. I cannot let that child escape. So really we're all about the politics. As Bruno said, as we all believe in this room, we're right, okay? It's right and it's just and it will improve education if we empower parents and not systems. We all know that and all the literature backs it up. We're here this is a think tank. It's up to Heartland to put out that intellectual ammunition to win the debate. Hey, baby, the debate's been won on this. We've won the debate. Now it, as Bruno said and as Sister said, it is a political fight. How do we win the political fight now to get what is right? I think it happens in 2 or 3 ways. Arthur Brooks, many of you know who Arthur Brooks is, runs a great think tank, the American Enterprise Institute. Arthur Brooks says we got to steal the language of the left. We've got to steal the language of the left. Here's what I think. Right now, inner city blacks and inner city Latinos in the city of Chicago are being educated in prisons. Free them! Free them! Let them escape. Free these parents. This is Ted Cruz said it a couple weeks ago. He's right. This is, if the Republican Party will recognize it, the civil rights issue of our times. You know, school choice is just not sexy enough. It really isn't. It should be right there on the front burner. I'm telling you, again, if I were king, this would be the first thing I would do. And then I'd sit back and drink coffee and relax, because you would see immediate results if we could allow every parent in this country to choose where their kids go to school. This is a civil rights issue. Black America, Hispanic America needs to rise up and own this issue. I'll jump on the Republican Party in a minute. But black America and Latino America needs to rise up. 60, 70, 80% of black parents want this freedom. And yet black leadership says no. And yet the teachers union says no. The teachers union and black leadership, because they've bought into the system, remember, I can't let those kids escape. If those kids escape, we lose money. If those kids escape, I lose my job. If those kids escape, I lose my benefits. That's the way the union thinks. That's the way black leadership thinks, because too much of black leadership, and increasingly so, regrettably so, Latino leadership thinks the same thing. Until our black Americans and Latino Americans rise up and demand this freedom, their leadership will continue to close the door on them. You got to have that pressure. You go all the way back to the first voucher program in this country up in Milwaukee that was begun and advocated for and fought for and led by an African American, Polly Williams. Same thing in Cleveland. Where you have the most robust school choice programs, these programs were fought for by African Americans or Latinos. National School Choice Week, man, these events should be held down on the south side of Chicago, not out here in lovely Arlington Heights. The Republican Party needs to own this issue. The Democrat Party, Tom Morrison knows that. Nationally, the Democrat Party is owned by the teachers union. Now, we know, unfortunately, we know that education is a state and local issue, and in way too many states, Tom Morrison knows this, he's the exception, way too many Republicans in Illinois owe their lives to the teachers union as well. Which is why I believe, and I'm about to close, which is why I believe, though we all in this room believe education is a state and local issue. Education, our founders believed, was a state and local issue. This issue needs to become a national issue. School choice needs to become a national issue. I'm not talking about federal legislation, though I would love to disband, get rid of the Department of Education immediately, and Tom Morrison, all the proceeds from that demolition should be block granted to the states and let the states implement school voucher programs. I'm not looking for national legislation when it comes to school choice. But Republicans nationally need to own this issue. And I go back to the marriage. The Republican Party's in a lot of trouble right now. It's their own doing. The Republican Party has an opportunity on a number of issues. Again, accidentally, Donald Trump has brought up a number of issues. Forget Trump. On this issue, 97% of blacks vote Democrat every single election. 90 to 97% of black Americans vote Democrat every single election. If I were running for national office and I knew that, I would own this issue. If I were running for the United States Senate in the state of Illinois, man, I would spend 85% of my time campaigning on Chicago's south and west side, and I would get in front of every African-American voter I could, and I'd ask them one question. Do you think you should have the freedom to decide where your kids go to school? Republicans have been given an opportunity. This issue of school choice needs to get attention. It needs to get out of the Heartland Institute. Bruno knows this. It needs to get out of the think tank world, and it needs to get out there on the street. And it's only going to happen if Black America rises up and says, I'm tired of this party stomping on me because they're owned by the teachers union. There's something wrong here when 75% of my neighbors want to be able to decide where I go to school, and yet my own leadership won't let that happen. But the Republican Party's got to be right there with them. This has got to be a national issue, implemented at the state and local level. I am closing. I was with Bill Bennett last week. Everybody remember Bill Bennett? What a great, great man. Reagan's former education secretary. And we were talking about this issue. And this is actually amazing because I used to have in my wallet, I don't have my wallet there anymore. It must be in the car. I always used to carry in my wallet, it's an old tattered newspaper article from 30 years ago. Former Reagan Education Secretary Bill Bennett was quoted in this newspaper article. I believe it was from the Chicago Tribune. And Bill Bennett said 30 years ago, why is it in America that when you make a bad hamburger, you're out of business in a month? If you keep making a bad burger day after day, in America, you're out of business in a month. But man, you can continue to deliver a bad education in America day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and nothing happens. You're still in business. I was with Bill Bennett last week, and you know what? He said the same thing to me. He said the exact same thing to me. And then Bill Bennett said, until my party, he said, Republicans, and I said, careful, I don't know if they're still my party, Mr. Bennett. But Bill Bennett said, until my party can learn to speak that way to America. Because you say that to everybody in America, we get it, right? You make a bad burger every single day, your burger shop's going to last a month. Everybody gets that. Bill Bennett said, until Republicans can learn to speak that way about this issue, and this issue is such a gift, we'll never get it. We'll never get it. Thank you.
All right, and our final speaker, again, before the question and answer period, Michael McHugh and I go back decades, actually, and I when I was just a little tad, homeschooling was still a novel concept, when actually homeschooling has been going on for hundreds, thousands of years. Many of our founding fathers were homeschooled, and around the 1960s, there became a renaissance of homeschooling as a movement. And so Mike and others here in the northwest suburbs began to be pioneers of a modern homeschooling movement. And initially it started out with dozens, a few hundreds, but then it rapidly grew to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And now we're probably at 1.5 million, 2 million students in this country who are being homeschooled. And they're excelling, and they're doing extremely well. In fact, they're now at the point where Ivy League schools, elite schools, are saying, we want these students. We want them. They're independent. They can think. They can write. They can read. They're leaders. And so I would like to give Mike's brief biography and then have him come up. So Mike is a lecturer, program administrator, textbook author for Christian Liberty Academy in Arlington Heights. He's written numerous articles about home education for newsletters and scholarly journals across the United States and abroad. He lives right here in the Chicago area with his wife and 7 children. They were married in 1984, and they've been actively involved with homeschooling since 1988. So with that, I'd like to welcome up Michael McHugh.
Thank you, Tom. It's nice to be among friends. When I first met Tom, just to give you some indication about how long that was, I had a full head of hair. Did I not, Tom? Yeah. The celebration of school choice is a celebration, in my mind, of what we've been talking about a lot today, and that's freedom. Freedom for parents and educators of every stripe in the private sector to be free from the dictates of centralized statist educators and their agendas and ideologies. Something that drove our school, our parochial school years ago, Christian Liberty Academy, and our faculty to get into the homeschooling movement was we were convinced that mass government-controlled education was lousy education, and that it did not serve the needs of children and of families. And certainly those sentiments have been echoed here on a number of levels. So as I say, I'm among friends here today, to be sure. We've seen some good things happening, though, haven't we, in recent decades? We've seen the growth of school choice movements. We've seen the growth of homeschooling and many other alternatives in the private sector. And we need to stop once in a while and acknowledge that there have been some successes. But we also have to say there's a lot more to do, a lot more families that need to be reached. But we should understand that freedom of choice and academic liberty is really a bulwark of a truly free society. Where it is not evident, you don't have true freedom, whatever else people might be told on the 9 o'clock news. So this school choice, to me, is, again, it's about freedom. And Sister Paul had mentioned a few minutes ago about the connection between taking responsibility and ownership over one's family and one's children, and that directly being related to one gaining more authority and more freedom. And I firmly believe that that is true. And that's why I think that homeschooling needs to be seen for what it is, the ultimate expression of true liberty and freedom. Because homeschool parents are willing to shoulder the primary responsibility for their children's education. And because they're willing to take on the responsibility, what naturally flows to them then is the authority, the respect, and the ability to be able to, the freedom to be able to go ahead and live that dream that they have for their children and for their families. The more responsibility then the parents take over their own households, the more freedom they're going to enjoy. Home education then is also a choice which I have to acknowledge here early on, is not for the faint of heart. My wife and I have been doing it for 20 plus years now with our 7 children. It's a big commitment, and it's a lot of work. Whenever I talk about homeschooling around the country or locally, I am always quick to emphasize that point. Yet, for the most part, I can honestly say, as a homeschool dad, it's an alternative that you pretty much get out of it what you put into it. If you're willing to roll up your sleeves and spend that time and invest those hours into your children's education and be central in that process, even if you're not actually doing all the instruction, there's great rewards. And so far, for me and my household, I can say very candidly that the journey has been well worth it to date. We have really, really benefited as a family from the homeschooling process. Again, not that it's been easy. As most conservatives realize, there is no free lunch, right? And homeschooling is no commitment. It does take a lot of work. But for those parents that have the time and have the inclination to take on that central of a role, there is a substantial payday, I can assure you, for having stepped up and made that. So for me in my house, it has been worth it. But for one primary reason. It's because my children's minds, and their souls for that matter, are free from secular government brainwashing, and they're free from the latest secular social experiments, which they never seem to run out of of treating the children of local communities as guinea pigs. And long ago, my wife and I realized, when we looked at that scenario, when we looked at that, we said, count us out. Yeah, the alternatives are not always easy. And again, there's no free lunch. But for us, there's no turning back. We've got a taste of the good life. And it's sometimes the hard life, but it's worth it. Now, today I've been asked and tasked here through the Heartland Institute to talk just for a few minutes, and I have just a few minutes left, about the why and how of personalizing homeschool curriculum, and to try to give you just a little taste about what that's all about. Again, in the few minutes I have available, this of course is a ridiculously impossible task to really do justice to the subject. That's never discouraged me before, so here we go. The philosophy of homeschool curriculum methodology begins with this simple premise, that each child is created with a particularly unique set of skills and a unique disposition towards life and learning. One primary goal then of homeschool curriculum design is to select materials that best cultivate the individual giftings and skills and dispositions, and ultimately the individual potential of each and every child. I like to read classic literature. Many of you in this room very probably do as well. And I was struck as I contemplate some of the ancient writers who spoke of children likening them unto arrows. Two of the most notable would be King David and King Solomon. I commend you to the book of Proverbs, for example, and Psalm 127, if you're in the mood. Some great thinkers that speak even today relevantly into this issue of treating children for who they are, individuals, and designing curriculum and orientating curriculum to them as individuals. And again, this is a relevant consideration for children as arrows, I believe, because although arrows tend to look pretty much all alike on a superficial level, the fact is they all have their own unique characteristics, their own unique tendencies, dictated largely by their composition and their construction. And I'll have you to we all be reminded that in centuries gone by, when arrows were made, they were made by hand. They were crafted carefully by individuals, and no two were exactly alike. And the analogy then reminds us that the mission of parent educators, properly seen, must be to identify then the unique characteristics or bent of their students in order that each of them may be balanced by those same parents and released into the world to accomplish the mission in life for which they were created. It's no accident then, I believe, of fate, that children are born into an intimate family structure where parents become keenly aware of their children's individual needs and their individual talents. In other words, into an environment in which those who know them best are centrally engaged in the process of guiding, nurturing, and instructing them from infancy to maturity. Home education then is best understood as a logical and a very natural extension of the role and call of parenting, where education is more not just taught as much as caught. Again, an education that's extremely and very much personally directed to the individual child. And of course, the beauty of home education is that it permits parent educators to tailor their approach, their instruction, the methodology of their curriculum to the unique needs of those children. There are many dedicated classroom teachers, as we all know. But even on a good day, those teachers are hard-pressed to be able to give those children an truly individual approach to their curriculum. Because there's always this fear that I'm going to somehow sell somebody else in the classroom short if I give just a little bit too much attention to Johnny or to Susie. The homeschooler does not have that problem. A homeschooler, in fact, can go even a step further from that. A homeschool parent has the luxury which most teachers do not have in traditional classrooms. They can give those same children preferential consideration and special attention on a regular basis, even a daily basis, which again is nothing but an uphill battle in a traditional classroom setting. Well, before I get into some of the nitty-gritty of curriculum design and the how and the mechanics of that in brief, let me just talk a little bit about what you need to do before you start thinking about, well, what kind of curriculum should I use as a home educator? You have to consider the learning style of your child. Because again, there is different as could be. Some of the common learning styles are as follows. Kinesthetic or hands-on learners. These students are often students who struggle to be able to truly comprehend subject matter unless they can taste it and feel it and touch it and interact with it on a very hands-on level. These are children that tend to learn best by doing stuff rather than just sitting in one place. They're students that are characterized typically by having a lot of wiggle, and students who have relatively short attention spans. Another class of learners learn particularly well through visual stimulation, through the eye gate. Such students then commonly love to read, and they enjoy information from the printed page as well as through videos and other visual stimulation, flashcards, and the like. Consider also the other type of learner, those who learn most effectively through listening, auditory learners. Such students tend to get lost in larger settings. It becomes a blur to them. Such students then need and often tend to wander in their mind, and they need subject matter explained to them in a personalized manner, either through lectures or better yet through very personalized interaction before it really begins to connect with them. And then finally, so-called multisensory learners. Learners who have the capability of learning through all these learning channels. They can learn equally well through the ear gate, through visual stimulation, as well as by touch and feel activities or projects. Now you might ask at this point, well, what does that have to do with homeschooling and curriculum design? Quite a bit, actually. If you, for example, have a student who you're thinking of homeschooling at the 3rd grade level, I'll use the example, and you're thinking of taking the easy way out, and so you just go out to get a canned curriculum, of which there's no shortage of them out there, for your 3rd grader. But the problem may well be this. You're buying a curriculum that appeals strongly to a learner who's really very visually oriented. Well, you come to find out after you've purchased the curriculum and you're well into your school year that you don't really have a visual learner. You have a learner that learns primarily best through doing. They've got a lot of wiggle. They're not going to sit in front of those books, those stack of books that you just spent good money to buy. So homeschoolers would do themselves well to try to ascertain what kind of learner they have in their hands before they start buying books and designing curriculums for their children. And if you're not sure as a parent educator what kind of learner you have in your hands, well, not to worry. Just buy a curriculum that is suited well to be able to use with a multiplicity of learners, and then go to school on and take note on which kind of method, which kind of stimulus works well and gets the most bang for your emphasis as a teacher with your child. And then simply just develop this step by step. Now finally today I want to just talk about some of the things that our wife and I did also in curriculum design. First of all, sit down and decide what you want your curriculum to do for you and your family. As the old saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, any train will get you there. And so as a homeschooler, you have to decide what you want out of a curriculum and then shop accordingly. Also, it's important to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are as a parent. And every parent has them. If you're not well suited to teach upper level writing or math or music, then you need to reach out and make sure you pick out the right kind of curriculum that's well orientated to your family's particular strengths and weaknesses, and make sure that you're choosing wisely. Not all homeschool curriculums, it should be stated, have the same type of learning curve. Some of them are very easy to work with, very child-oriented. Some of them are not, and you need to go to school on that as well. I'm just rushing through these final details because I have about 1 minute left. I told you this was impossible. Also, don't be afraid. My wife and I have not been afraid to take on tutors. Just because you're homeschooling doesn't mean you need to be an expert in everything or pretend you are. Reach out to the community. You are going to be pleasantly surprised. There's retired teachers down the street. There's people from church. There's people from work that can come alongside you to bring you to a better level of excellency in your home school. Also, give your children a standardized achievement test, if at all possible, each year. That gives you a baseline in which you can measure and contrast your growth and your success from month to month and year to year, and then also gives you a chance to see where your child's strengths and weaknesses really lie. Go to a homeschool convention is another, I think, practical suggestion. If you've never been to one, attend one. There's lots of people who can give you good guidance and lots of good direction in the area of curriculum. And also there's a great exhibit hall there where you can compare all the popular curriculums in one fell swoop, and in one afternoon you can receive a lot of great instruction on that level. Here's a curriculum if you're taking notes, or those online. Go to www.designyourhomeschool.com or homeschools.org. And both of these websites have great resources. Other resources were mentioned earlier about free stuff, lots of excellent materials. So the good news in closing is that you don't have to be concerned about a lack of resources as home educators. If anything, the trouble nowadays is sorting through the maze of excellent alternatives, many of them low cost, I might add, that you have as home educators. Finally today, I would close with this emphasis. After all, I walk in the circles of Christian education. Parent educators, in closing, must take full advantage of the freedom they possess to incorporate educational resources in their children's curriculum that promote virtuous liberty. More than ever, our nation needs those who are not only constitutionally literate, but morally literate in terms of the Ten Commandments and the Golden Rule. As Robert Dabney in past centuries once said, and I love this quote, "To educate the mind without purifying the heart is but to place a sharp sword into the hand of a madman." Only a virtuous people can remain a free people. Thank you very much for your time.
Mike, thank you very much. Those were excellent remarks. So now if we could invite our experts up. And for those of you in the audience, if you could be writing down your questions right now, that would be great. And Lenny Jarrett is in the back. He's got a microphone. And so, Lenny, you're going to read the question from the card, or how are we going to?
I'll read the question, or have them ask it, and we'll ask it here. If they want to read it, it's fine.
Okay.
So get everybody seated first.
And then up here at the table, you just share the microphone. Make sure you speak directly into it so everybody at home can hear you properly. All right, Lenny, so you have a question? Go ahead.
Okay, yes, for Sister Mary Paul. Please repeat the statistic of black males graduating Catholic grade school and then graduating high school.
I would be glad to do that. Young men of color in Chicago, although they increased the graduation rate, are now at about 42% when it's really counted. So what we've been able to trace in our schools is that our 8th grade graduates, no matter what school they go to, are able to graduate at a rate of 92%. If they attend a Catholic high school, that goes up to 95%. So that's significant for us statistically. Then of that 95% that go to a Catholic high school, we know that 96% are accepted into college.
My name is Bruce Sucher. I was educated in the Chicago Public Schools, and I taught at Englewood High School. So I feel like I have a bit of expertise. The one original, and Michael, you brought it up, the one original theory I had teaching was that while I was in school, I would say I was average. I got B's and C's. I'd rather be playing baseball than studying. But when I was teaching, I realized I had to give a certain amount of time to the top, brightest kids in my class because I wanted to. And I had to give an equal amount of time to the worst kids in my class because I had to. So I think the problem with the public schools, I mean, one problem, many, but one problem is, and Michael answered it in many ways, that people like myself, who I would always have considered myself average until I began to change, are ignored and they are not inspired to follow their passion and become great people.
We actually have an online question real quick if you want to make a quick remark about that, Mike.
Well, just very quickly, and that is as one who also has a touch point with the a touch point with traditional education as well, traditional classroom education. It strikes me that sometimes we put too much on the classroom teacher. At the end of the day, part of my remarks were trying, at the heart of them was that no one can really replace a mom or a dad, and the ultimate commitment they have to their own children. The teachers, the good ones, and there are a lot of them, they try, but at the end of the day, they cannot really replace that kind of level of commitment. So, yeah, it's a struggle which most classroom teachers are well acquainted with.
And I just wanted to add to that. So I had the perspective of being a fifth grade teacher in a parochial school, and I ran. So it's not just a public school issue; it could happen in a parochial or private school too. So as a teacher, I would try to dedicate at least 5 minutes a day for individual attention for my students. 5 minutes. That's it. And if I could achieve that, I thought that I'd really done something fantastic. Imagine what a parent could do. Imagine, right? And beyond that, just the limitations of a class period of 40 minutes. I might have some students who are excelling and they get the concept in 5 minutes, and then for the remainder of the class, they're bored. And then I have the students in the middle who might ascertain the material within that 40-minute period, and then I might have a handful of students who, if we only had 10 more minutes of classroom time, they'd get it. But that bell would ring, and they'd be on to their next class period, and we'd have to start the process all over again the next day. And I thought, oh, if only I had 10 more minutes. And so just a perspective that your viewers should know.
Real quick, differentiated instruction is a challenge everywhere. But the biggest differentiators and the ones that really are our master teachers, how many of you had homework? How many of you helped with homework? You were partners.
Just want to really quickly add to this that there's no silver bullet, and there's not necessarily a situation that solves every problem. If you're from a broken home or a dysfunctional home, maybe something like this isn't going to fix your problem. But interestingly enough, what you're talking about with these examples that everyone's given here, there's different kinds of models. So you've got homeschooling, but then you've also got blended learning, and then you've got schools. For example, there's a charter school in Yuma, Arizona called Carpe Diem, and they're just opening a new one in Indiana, where the kids go in and they sit at a computer, and a sophisticated software program takes them through subject matter. And it's affective, so that when they answer one question, it tells them what they do next. If they don't answer the question, it goes backwards and says, what part don't they get? And then there's guides that walk around and say, oh, you're stuck here, and they unstick them. And then after an hour and a half of the computer time, they go into a classroom, not with everybody their age or everybody who's as big and tall as they are or anything like that, but they go into a classroom, 6 or 7 kids, where everybody in that classroom is exactly where they are. And then the teacher teaches them with doing what teachers do, which is adding value and content. So again, you can think of the thousands of ways that you can improve a brick and mortar school, that you can improve homeschooling, that you can improve everything in between. And there's no one solution is the one really important thing to understand. There's no one solution, which is why money following the child is a more effective strategy.
Okay, this question comes from Jim Minardi, who is watching our live stream. Everyone wave to Jim.
Jim.
He says, I went to a Catholic grade school, high school, and Jesuit university. I loved the education I received. What would be the first step to bringing that quality of education to people all across the country?
We were very gifted within a Catholic school system, and thank you for the investment of your parents. That was giant and huge. But what it was also not just investment of cash, but investment of expectation, and a shared expectation that this is what you were meant to be, and who you were meant to be. And within that expectation, because you were able to have teachers, I mean, there's a myth about, the Catholic school teacher, it's not second best. Everyone in our system is certified. And I don't know that that doesn't make a great teacher, to be honest with you. But this whole idea that, you're choosing Catholic schools because it's second best, I'll tell you what, the folks I hired out of the public school system came because they wanted to teach. And they wanted to teach this child who wanted to learn, and this child wanted to learn because the parent wanted them to learn. That's our secret sauce. So school choice baked into, I think earlier what you said, tremendous. It would overnight change the way we look to suddenly say to parents, you can do this. I have a brother who's a professor at Vanderbilt in Nashville. He has 8 children, ages 14 to 3 months. They homeschool those 8 kids because that's their choice. So we all are, we're not all the same, but to open up that opportunity and to set that expectation is the magic sauce.
All right, I've got a quick question here. One statement here. I know somebody's asking about Common Core. Since this is about school choice, I don't really want to get into Common Core, but if you've got a question about Common Core, see me afterwards, and we can discuss that afterwards. Okay, another one for Sister Mary Paul. You mentioned scholarship granting organizations starting in Florida. What is the status now in Florida and in Illinois?
My understanding for scholarship granting organizations in Florida is that they had one kind of master scholarship granting organization that now is giving out $450 million a year. They have now a second one that's starting up that will also serve any of those kids across a whole spectrum of private schools, their choice. In Illinois, it hasn't happened yet. In Illinois, that would be, boy, if I wake up someday and that's what we have, I'm starting one, baby. We're done. That's because that is, to me, tremendous power and constitutionality and opportunity would be to take a look at these, what they call SGOs.
Yeah, Tom has some work to do on that one.
Right. I want to ask a question, if that's okay. I mean, the one theme that came up a few times was that it seems like the teachers' unions are, basically defenders of the status quo. And so what could we have up on this panel? Someone who's more libertarian leaning. We have someone who comes from a homeschooling background, someone from Catholic education. And I saw what happened in Indiana, and it seemed like there was a strong coalition that was formed to advance school choice. So could each of the panel members kind of address that? Could you see different groups coming together from libertarian to those who believe in the social justice movement, civil rights issues? How could we form a coalition to advance the cause here in Illinois and in other states where there are major roadblocks? Let's just go down the line.
I'll try to be brief. I say this quite often. This, from the legislative perspective, this is a pitched political battle against the most powerful lobby in America, possibly more powerful than the NRA, as powerful as the NRA, if not. And it's a pitched political battle. So you're going to have to walk door to door. You're going to have to primary. You're going to have to challenge Republican office holders. Tom mentioned earlier that we came a few votes short of getting a voucher bill. Who knows whether Pat Quinn would have signed it. He was governor at the time. But guess what? Michael Madigan did his part and got Democratic votes for that bill. Who killed it? 12 downstate Republicans, slaves of the teachers' unions. So if you want school choice in Illinois, you're going to have to challenge a Republican office holder. And you're going to have to do it unapologetically and brutally, because they're going to be brutal with you, and you're not going to do it. You're not going to win unless you're brutal with them, and you have to take them down. And if you're not willing to take that fight, don't go blaming the Democrats until you've gotten your own house cleaned up. And quite frankly, there are Democratic votes for a voucher bill in the state.
And I would say, not just Republican, go to everyone. Go to your local legislator and say, this is a priority for us. If you're able to be king and you made that one nationally, why not for Illinois? This is the priority. As you bake up this budget, as you bake up the revenue bill, you know what? This needs to be cooked into it. This is a critical need. And, you know, we can prove it from other states that it is not going, you're going to get some money back on this. Not just on your educated citizenry, but on relieving some overcrowding in some schools and not having to build some schools. There are some practical reasons why this is popular in other states that I think would be, for both fiscal conservatives or the people say you're stealing from the public trust. We're really not. We're allowing people to use their taxes in an efficient way that is going to allow parents to get their kids the best education they can. And so I'm all about going individually and saying to wherever you live to talk to your state representative, senator, and say, this is what we want.
Excuse me. We need to wait. Just go ahead and we'll go through. If you've got another question, we'll be able to ask it in a little
I
while.
was just going to say that from a homeschool perspective, school choice strikes me in all the politics that needs to be dealt with. It is an easy sell. And I think that you're going to find homeschoolers to be easily recruited within these kind of circles. And I think we sort of get it as a community. And the good news is that unlike the 80s, when, to be honest, the homeschool movement, politically speaking, you know, sort of was summed up on the extremes of the far right Christian groups and the far left hippies, frankly. Those days are long gone. And homeschooling today, in terms of socioeconomic and political spectrums, it covers the whole waterfront. It's a far more eclectic group, so which tends to impress more of your politicians when people coming from the homeschool community are not just representing one demographic group or whatever. So the bottom line is that, you know, homeschools are an easy sell.
I really think to get school choice, to get school vouchers, the quickest, most effective way to get real robust school voucher programs is when it's led by, when it's initiated by a black mother on Chicago's South Side. Until the consumers of this crappy education do something about it, nothing's going to happen. So we've got to figure out a way to go into those communities and encourage African American parents, Latino parents to lead this effort. That's what scares the heck out of the unions.
Okay, we've got another question back here.
Thank you, please. All right. My name is Tara Thomas. I'm a black parent from Barrington, so, okay, Republican. All right, so I'm saying this to say that I'm also a founder, co-founder, chief co-founder of North Shore College Prep Charter High School, which will be an all-girl college pretorial school. We have an all-boys college pretorial school, which we're trying to partner with Urban Prep, for any of you who are familiar with Urban Prep. I am a graduate of Catholic schools. My sons went to, I don't know, one of the few Catholic boarding schools in the country, Orchard Lake St. Mary's. I learned under IHM nuns, you know, I know I'm talking about, and my father was one of the first graduates of Notre Dame School of Architecture. So my background probably completely comes from the Catholicism. Yet our schools are probably going to be geared in that direction as well. But my question, and we are on the North Shore, the old boys school will be in North Chicago, and the all-girls school is slated to be in Waukegan. We have the support of our nearby neighbors, Lake Forest, and I believe Highland Park as well.
Thank you for what you're doing.
So the one good thing is I'm surprised to hear you say that Republicans are not necessarily for charter schools, because we felt all of our support has come from the Republican Party thus far.
Actually, it was downstate. It's mainly downstate and central.
Because up here
yeah.
it is. And as you may know, our governor has a charter school in Chicago named after him, Rauner Charter, which is doing very well, I understand. But my question is, I am a PhD candidate, and for students that are taking the ACT, the LSAT, MCAT, teacher certification, you pay a lot of money for these exams. You never get them back. Now they're taking photographs, fingerprints as a way of identification. And recently, 0.05% of the teachers' certification test last year in 2015 was passed by African Americans. When you have a photograph, fingerprints, and whatever to identify who's taking that test, and you're telling us only 0.5 African Americans are passing, I think it's an unfair exam. Number one, there's very few things you would pay for and not be able to see the results for. we pay $200 plus. You can take the test 5 times. That's $1,000, and you never see your results. Pearson has a monopoly on this. So my question to Mr. Brenner and Mr. Walsh is, how can that change?
Well, first of all, that goes into some very interesting Common Core style issues, which again, this is about school choice, not Common Core. First of all, every state legislator should be forced to give a yes or no on whether they would vote for a bill that forced transparency on all of your records. And it's just the simplest bill, yes or no, up and down vote. No student can be denied looking at, and this goes from kindergarten through college, no student can be denied looking at their own records, period, end of story. And here's where the fight's going to be. The citizens are all going to be for you, and the big donors to political campaigns, the universities, none of the universities want to have transparency. None of the testing companies want. If there was transparency in testing, Pearson would be in jail. I don't know if you can put a whole company in jail, but they should try. So that's the only answer, and it's a real simple answer. Get somebody to file a bill and advertise it and force people to pass it. And if it doesn't pass and no one signs it, you're going to be out of luck.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next question here is, how can a private school motivate its parent population to advocate for true school choice?
Go ahead, and then I'll.
Hey, Lenny, repeat that.
How can a private school motivate its parent population to advocate for true school choice?
Who asked that question? Explain. I'm confused. Right.
Private school with motivated parents.
Yep.
But a lot of times I just don't think they see the big picture.
No, great point. Yes, they're into their child's education. I think this goes to what we've all been talking about here, because really this is what you want to walk away with. How are we going to make something happen? We have a lot of Republicans who live in the suburbs who love their public and or their private schools. And Bruno knows when it comes to school vouchers, they can get kind of wiggy. They don't necessarily get enthusiastic about African American or Latino or poor white kids in Waukegan or North Chicago going to schools in Lake Forest. It's about forming a coalition, and the coalition, to my way of thinking, is minority leadership on this. Minority parents along with Republican legislators. That's got to be the marriage, I think. Where we've seen that marriage in states, we've seen pretty decent school choice legislation. The Democrats will follow, and the teachers' unions will be crying at the end. Bruno, add to that.
It's a really tough. It's a tough question, and here's the reason why. I'm not disagreeing with Joe, but I'm giving you the other half of the equation, and that's the half of the equation that nobody wants to focus on. The number one barrier to school choice as a political group is the suburban soccer mom. And they vote more, they donate more, they are much more powerful. If you want to take a voting block that politicians are most afraid of, and Tom, if I'm wrong, you can correct me on this one, but it's the suburban soccer mom, because one of them is mad, then 10 of them get mad, and then they call someone else, and then 40 of them are mad, and the next thing you know, you've got a primary challenger, and they are dragging you across the coals. So, you've got a private school, and you want to get the parents involved. They have to risk not being invited to the barbecues, not being invited to the block party, because heaven forbid one of your parents at your private school goes to a party and says, oh, I'm for vouchers because that would help subsidize and we could do different things with our kids' education. And that soccer mom is going to be, her head's going to explode, and she's going to say, you're taking money out of my school district. And this is the hard part about this political battle. You have to, if it's politics, you have to. It's votes, and if it's votes, you have to get more votes from, disadvantaged and Hispanics and blacks who are going to outvote the soccer moms, and that's hard. Or you're going to have to persuade the soccer mom, the white suburban soccer mom, who incidentally doesn't admit it, and even though they probably all vote further left than they ever used to, they don't want to admit it, but they want the educational apartheid of the district system.
Bruno's right. You know why? Because they have school choice. These soccer moms have school choice. If they're not happy with their suburban public school in Lake Forest or Libertyville or Palatine, they can go to the Catholic school or the private school. They have school choice. Now, look, we all love Milton Friedman, and again, if I could snap my fingers, we would have universal school choice. But I think we need to focus on the communities right now in America that do not have school choice. And these are primarily our urban, more low-income areas where they don't have school choice. Bruno's right. The soccer moms don't want to hear about that. All I care about is my school out in Arlington Heights. I don't care about anything else. Go down to the south side of Chicago. Let's get school choice down there.
No, I'm going to disagree again. I happen to love a lot of soccer moms. Stop it. Well, I can't, not all of them, but the truth of the matter is that there are some that really have gotten to be a soccer mom because they came from being another kind of mom or another kind of kid. Does that make sense? And I think you can appeal to these soccer moms and to say, look, you got that opportunity. You have that opportunity. You're paying taxes poorly, right? For other kids not to have this opportunity. Doesn't it make sense to open this up to working class families who have kids who can't afford it? Yes. So say to the soccer moms, come on, soccer mom.
I love you, sister, and maybe I have to go to confession tomorrow. Sister is right, but don't focus on the soccer moms now. But I want to make sure I'm on record, Lenny, saying this. Every word Sister said was right. I agree with every single word she said. Thank you. I feel better.
It's okay. You're forgiven.
And I'll just finish off saying you have to focus on everybody. You have to win hearts and minds. And I'm not saying go yell at your local white suburban soccer mom and get on her case. I'm saying you have to persuade them that choice is not a threat and that it's good for society and it's good for her. And in the meantime, as I've said in my presentation, hopefully something will come along, a killer app, a disruptive product online that will circumvent the entire debate, and all the soccer moms and everybody else is going to say, how do I get my kid into that system?
Can I just add something to this? That, as a state, our budget is badly broken, and so there are calls for more taxes, we just need more money for this, more money for that. The Chicago public schools are hundreds of millions of dollars in default, or they're approaching default right now. So my pitch to suburbanites is, look, as long as you live in the state of Illinois, this is an important issue for you, because there are certain communities that are demanding more money for public education. We don't have more money to give to that. Why not start using the power of competition to give people what they truly want anyway, which is choice, and do it in a way where it's a win-win, really, because the students and the parents get what they want. There's competition. That forces the traditional public schools to work harder, to be more responsive to parents. And so I think that's something that needs to be brought up as well.
Okay. All right, let's as we'll get it down. We'll go ahead to another question, Bruno. I'll come back to you, or you can talk when we're after the question here.
Hi, my name is Mandel. I'm a Republican candidate for state representative in District 11, and I don't have 3 election cycles to make this argument. I have 9 months. So for Tom and Joe, I would just wonder if you have any advice for me and a number of Republican candidates. We haven't had Republican candidates in a lot of Chicago districts for a long time. We've got about 6 or 7 of them this cycle. Northwest all the way down to Lincoln Park. It's kind of an L shape. And so what can we do in the next 9 months instead of the next 6 years to get this done?
Why don't we'll talk offline? How about we do that? Okay, let's get to some more questions.
My name is Lorraine Madia from Schaumburg, and I'm just a nobody. I'm going to be off the track a bit, but this is kind of startling.
Talk into the microphone.
Oh, pardon me. It says here, this is from www.wnd.com. Islamists are running 140 tax-funded charter schools in the U.S. Not enough parents are aware of this. I got a whole bunch of information about this. I can't read it all, but I think we need to wake up about this too. It's kind of scary.
Couple of things. First of all, if we believe in school choice, we have to believe in school choice. And we can't say, well, school choice is okay for Catholics, but it's not good for Muslims. As a matter of fact, let's make sure Muslims don't get school choice. There's very simple ways to monitor this stuff. And one is, and it's already in the Indiana voucher law, and it's already in the laws, you can't preach hate. You know, and if you preach hate, we're going to shut down your school. So then you have a fine dividing line about, well, if somebody talks about the benefits of Sharia, is that preaching hate? All I'm trying to tell you is that if we start saying, well, school choice for everybody but Islamists, and there is a distinction between people who are Muslim and Islamists, or Islamic radicals. But if we start saying that, then it's going to be the slippery slope of, no, we can only have secular humanist schools, you can't have Catholic schools. So I want to be very careful that should there be regulations that say no public dollars can go toward funding hate, the answer is yes, there should be regulations about that. And if a charter school is preaching hate, shut it down. But if we're serious about school choice, then we have to be serious about school choice, and we can't say school choice for everybody but them. That's my view.
I would just add that I wouldn't frame this issue so much on the issue of hate or no hate. I would look at it more from the vantage point of saying that if you believe the Christian God is in heaven and he is ultimately ruling and overruling in the affairs on earth, then you're going to go ahead by faith and you're going to do your level best to advance your cause, and you're not going to be stressed and worried or have to work against some other group taking advantage of the same liberty that you're enjoying. So I think it's a question of liberty, and we ought to, regardless of our particular faith, we ought to be willing to extend freedom to the next person, especially if we believe that our cause is right. Because if we truly believe it's right, we believe that there is a power much greater than any of us that is going to advance our cause if we're right.
And I'll come at it from a very practical viewpoint. Most charter schools have to be recognized by the state. If you're state recognized, there are certain things you have to do. You have to say the Pledge of Allegiance. A flag is in the classroom. Does that make sense? So there are also some very practical guidelines around what kind of school state money should and could be put into.
Okay, I've got a question I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit. Special ed programs, how can they be better incorporated into private and charter schools? There's a lot of talk and pushback where some charter schools have been closed because they have not dealt with special ed quite as well as they should have, and it's used as a weapon sometimes against school choice. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I'll just jump in first here. There's various voucher bills that are in operation in Florida and also in Oklahoma, where they essentially voucherized special education first. And which, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously, I think school choice makes sense for everybody, but if you're going to start somewhere, you start with the poorest and the most difficult to educate, or you start with special ed, or you start in both those places. And basically, the child receives an assessment, and that assessment says what their special education need might be, and then you voucherize it. It's like, okay, and it might be 20 grand. Okay, we are a rich enough society, and we decide we're going to, and then of course everybody's going to want to get their kid, labeled as special ed so that they can get 20 grand, but that's not the way it's going to work. The fact is that special ed is one of those situations that is probably best voucherized first, because what does that do? It allows the market to develop the answer for that specific need. Instead of, and just look at how insane the district system is. You have parents all over the country suing their school districts. There's federal law. that says that you have to meet these people's needs. So they're suing their school districts to force the school districts to pay for special services for their child. We found all of this stuff with Open the Books and American Transparency, which was what Adam Andrzejewski started. And there's a school district here in the suburbs that's paying $120,000 a year to send some kid to some special home up in the mountains of Idaho somewhere. And I might get the state and the suburb wrong, which I didn't mention the suburb because I'm not sure which. But that's how insane the current system is. Every district has to be sued. Every district has to have all these different things. And then everybody has to spend all of this money for a big special ed infrastructure. It's like, no, here's a $20,000 voucher. Here's a $15,000 voucher. And that's how you solve that problem.
Our new superintendent for Chicago, Dr. Jim Riggs, came from being superintendent in Cincinnati, and Ohio has very robust, different versions of school choice happening. And he actually helped to lead the charge to include autistic kids in school and getting full funding for them in Catholic schools. So I'm kind of excited about that. I don't care where you start, but that's where we need to end.
Okay, next question is right here.
Thank you. Can I have that? I'm Dennis. I'd like first thank everybody that's here because it means that we all do care, and I thank the panel too. It's very nice of you to do this today. I'm a technologist, and I think that we can all agree that technology has changed the way we all live. Technology equally can change the way we conduct ourselves in the schools. And some of the issues that I have are relative to technology. There are over 2.5 million classrooms across America in roughly 100,000 schools. And today, less than 30% of our schools use video-based learning in education. And of that, less than about 5% of the classrooms are actually experiencing video in the classroom. It's the fastest way to cross-pollinate the learning experience across America today. So what are your thoughts on video education in the classrooms? Anybody can take that.
Again, what's my view is it should be choice. You know, if someone wants to homeschool their child using textbooks and never turns on a cell phone or an iPad, they should be able to do that. I'm a big fan of blended learning, which has, you know, affective software. The computer, you do a long division problem. If you get it right, you get a harder one. If you get it wrong, it goes back and tests whether you're doing the place value or the numeracy of knowing how to divide or multiply. So I would not want to. What I try to do when a question like yours comes up is I want to ask people to step back from the silver bullet idea. Vouchers are not a silver bullet. Blended learning isn't a silver bullet. Even choice, broadly, is not a silver bullet. It's a solution. So I'm 100% with you that we need to do this, but here's what happens. You make your very strong case for technology, and then the Los Angeles Unified School District goes out and spends $1 billion or $100 million or some insane amount of money on iPads, lockdown iPads for every student, which literally lasted 5 minutes before a bunch of students hacked them and were surfing the net. And it was a boondoggle. So I'm with you 100% on that kind of learning. I'm just, you know, it's the parent and the control that parent takes over how their child can and should be educated, and the actual use of choice that's more important than any one technological platform, in my view, even though I'm a big fan of it and I agree with you.
And I would like to say it not only is it not a silver bullet, but we have to just be very careful that it is blended learning can go all the way from here's everything online, good luck, and somebody just taking attendance, literally, to something that really what you're talking about, maybe bringing videos into the classroom or asking the kids to do using it. Technology is a tool. Technology is a tool, and people learn differently. And now that we have that technology, what a terrific opportunity to adjust it to the learning style of the child and to use it as a tool, not as the God in itself, but as the tool for school improvement.
Okay. Of course, multimedia presentations in whatever form, they have their place. As already been stated, sometimes it can go too far. But I, for one, would like to vote, maybe this is a suggestion for Tom Morrison, but maybe a bill should be passed saying a warning label needs to be put on these electronic gizmos, because it strikes me that we're losing the ability with this generation of young people to be able to know how to converse and to discuss and to debate. They don't know logic. They don't even know how to think, and they spend most of their waking hours sitting in front of these electronic gadgets. Tom, there should be a law.
Okay, real quick before Mr. Lindstrom here asks his question, if you can take just a few seconds here, how do we make this issue, make sure it gets attention in the presidential race and becomes an issue like Joe was talking about?
Actually, the reporter who interviewed me, and she was here earlier and she left, but she interviewed me yesterday on the phone, and she asked that question or in an indirect way, and my answer is, I don't know that we should. Okay, if it's not a federal issue, then maybe we shouldn't. Other than to say we need to put parents back in control. One of the things that worries me most about all the presidential candidates talking about this stuff and the national issues in this is it's either a national curriculum or a Common Core or centralization or greater centralization, or it's the folks on the right saying we need to put more local control. And when they say local control, they mean the school district, and if they mean the school district, they don't mean local control, because folks, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first, local control is a myth. Your district is dictated to by the state board, and now it's being dictated to by all the states signing on to Common Core, which allows you the whopping 13% of your curriculum to be independent. And so whenever somebody says Common Core, just remember this one thing. If you want your curriculum, you can keep your curriculum. Okay? Because that's the truth about the district and local control. The only local control you really have is where the money follows the child to a vast new array of independent education providers. So when it comes down to the presidential level and the senators and all those other people, the only real answer federally is hands off. Oh, and I do want to say one quick thing, because you said I could bring it up later. Here's my suggestion for there ought to be a law. But this is, and no one's tried this yet, but this might be killer. It might be the kind of thing that wakes people up. And it's not a tuition tax credit or a voucher or all this other stuff that everybody talks about, but a property tax credit for people who utilize homeschooling or private school. And once those districts, once the parents realize that their $10,000, $14,000, $25,000 property tax bill could be cut by $1,000 or $2,000 or in half or something, then all of a sudden they might perk up. And so it would just be interesting to see what would happen if someone said, how about a property tax bill, and then advertised it statewide so that all of a sudden everybody who hates property taxes more than anything starts demanding they get their property tax credit for utilizing a private school or homeschool.
I wanted to add a comment to the earlier question, and I think Bruno just answered it. If that's the type of school choice that you could get around, then I think everybody in private schools would be all for that.
Yeah, I disagree with Bruno on this. I think this is a civil rights issue. We're in agreement that I don't want the federal government doing anything, but politically speaking, I want my Republican candidates for president standing on their soapbox and enunciating loud and clear that every parent in this country should be able to decide where their kids go to school. And I'd love to see Republican candidates stress that, especially in our inner cities. I'd love to see a Republican candidate for president say that if I'm elected, I'm going to hammer the states. I'm going to work on a few specific states to try to get a few specific states and a few specific cities in those states to free the kids in those cities and those states. I think this would be a wonderful national issue for the Republican Party to grab and just get behind. This is a civil rights issue.
I have a bill for that. And I wrote about it when I was on staff here. I mean, I'm sort of on staff here, but I'm senior fellow, but this was back when I was working here every day. The offices were still downtown, and it's a federal parent trigger. And so a really good bill for a for a congressional representative or a senator to run on would be, you can say shut down the Department of Education, or you could say what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose the entire Department of Education. So we're going to stop all the centralization, we're going to stop all of the Common Core pushing, we're going to do all this other stuff, and we're essentially going to create a federal parent trigger voucher for every child in America who's in a school that's D or below. So you come up with a rating of the school, and they already have that infrastructure. And every child who's in a school that's D or below, that money goes, it jumps the school district, it jumps the state bureaucracy, it jumps all the money-grubbing administrators who want their hands on everything. And it jumps right over them and puts a federal parent trigger in that student's pocket, a federal parent trigger voucher that says, oh, you're in a bad school, you're triggered. And incidentally, this was the original model that W had in mind with the original No Child Left Behind, is that it was originally supposed to have this parent trigger voucher in it, that when the child was in a failing school, federal money would go directly to that child. And that was, of course, stripped out by Ted Kennedy, but that's the issue. If there's something that they should run on at the federal level, that would be my thing that they should do.
Now I've moved to the far right of Bruno. I don't want any federal legislation. I don't want the federal government deeming any school an A, a B, a C, or a D, or an E or an F school. I want the Republican Party nationally to grab this issue nationally, to give voice to this issue. I don't want them doing a damn thing.
Okay,
I
next question.
That, but I won't.
Yeah, next question. I'm going to ask this one a little bit differently since we're talking about school choice. How can school choice actually help what's going on with a lot of the indoctrination, political correctness, and which is actually leading to less subject matter mastery of teachers and more social engineering in the classroom?
Well, I'll get back to, if I could answer that. Just my comment from earlier. There are a host of reasons why parents or students would want to choose their school or homeschool or what have you, to just have that choice. It's not just on academics. I mean, a lot of the suburban schools here tout their academic performance, but there's something that upsets the parents about aspects of the curriculum that are more social engineering. And so we ought to give parents and students choice. It's their money after all.
Full agreement. In the short term, as bad as it is, you really only have one choice if you can afford to take it, and that's pull your kid out. If your kid's going to a public school today, your kid is getting some level of indoctrination. A quick, and again, I have a bill for everything. And there's days that I think that maybe these micro bills that just change one little aspect of things can be as powerful as a big giant voucher bill. But here's a real simple little bill idea that you can put into a law, and that is that it's a curriculum, and this all comes back to transparency. A curriculum transparency bill. No public school can teach anything that the parent isn't informed of at least 2 weeks in advance, so that every parent, not every parent's going to do it, but that every parent can go online and say, this is my child's curriculum, and then parents get an opportunity to question that. It's not a silver bullet, but what it does do is it strips out many of the huge surprises where, they come home and say, well, we watched Al Gore's stupid movie and all this other nonsense yesterday.
Okay, got a question. I'm going to kind of ask this in two parts here. Well, and first part of it's for Sister Mary Paul. How much does it cost to educate a Catholic grade school student? Then there was another was how much does it cost to educate a public school student? And in relation to this, the $500 tax credit in Illinois, does that apply to grandparents if they're paying the tuition at a school, at a private school?
Let's start with the last one first because that's the easiest. I'm not sure. I think I'd have to go back and find out for you, but I believe it is whoever is paying the tuition who can prove it on their things that they're paying for the supplies or the tuition. That's how I think we have treated it within a school. So I think that's right. The Catholic school elementary cost obviously depends on how big the school is, how effective it's run, that kind of thing. bottoms out at about $3,200. It tops out at $7,000 a child. The average is about $5,800 a year to educate a Catholic school student. Now, the same answer is true for the district. Your districts vary widely depending on, again, their property taxes. The state provides a certain amount, but the property taxes, of course, go over that. And sometimes it can cost as much as $12,000, $14,000, $15,000. Our secondary schools average is about $9,000 a year. And again, you're looking at it, that's the cost per student. That's not often what we're charging the students, because they'll be giving away millions of dollars in aid to be able to have a student come. And some of the schools, high schools, really good ones, are really costing $15,000, but are holding their tuition under. Some charge that amount and then use discounts. So the different ways of doing it. But the most good schools, both elementary and secondary, can give you exactly what their budget is.
Okay, we've got one more question here, and then I've got one more question on the card.
Hi. I've homeschooled my girls. My youngest one was in kindergarten. She went to a private school. And then we skipped first grade, which is part of the reason why we homeschooled, is because she was reading at a sixth grade level in kindergarten. Excuse me. And so we pulled both of the girls out of private schools, and my first one went to public school. So we've kind of been through the whole gamut of it. But one thing for homeschoolers that I find, they're a little leery of school choice. And the reason is because they feel that it might be some kind of government intervention, or they're going to be, I don't know, singled out. They just kind of want to be like left alone. Okay, and so the biggest thing I think for homeschoolers is, in our district, I believe that it's about $2,000 that are taken out per child of that taxes that we have to pay per child, even though they don't attend public school whatsoever. We just like that $2,000 per child. My goodness, you know, it can cost, in the private school that we were going to at the long time ago, it was like $5,000 for a lower elementary kid. We can do so much with $2,000. And if there's some way that we could, you know, get that money, that would be great.
I think that's going to resonate. I know it resonates with my heart. I'm a homeowner. I just got my property tax bill, and I just about wanted to cry when I think of the money that's going into that. And here I am putting in the sweat equity to take care of much of the responsibility over the training and education of my children, but there's no benefits whatsoever on the tax spectrum thing. And you're right, of course, homeschoolers do take a healthy, libertarian, generally perspective on things. They'd like to just be left alone. They like to have the least government involvement as possible. But at the same time, almost all, if not everybody up here on the stage has pointed to the fact that we have some dragons to slay politically to forward our issues and concerns. And like it or not, that involves rolling up our sleeves and getting dirty and pushing through these issues and not just pretending as though we can just kind of stay in our own little communities and everything will get better, because it's not. But I feel your pain as a taxpayer.
Mike's comment kind of dovetails into what I want to say, and that is one of the reasons, one thing that Illinois has going for it, it is very friendly toward homeschooling families. And part of the reason is homeschooling families are very effective lobbyists. So every Cherry Pie Day, that's what I wanted to talk about. Every spring, bus loads and carloads of families come from all over the state of Illinois down to the state capitol, and they deliver cherry pies, freshly baked cherry pies, to all of the state reps and state senators. And it's an effective, friendly, civil reminder that they want to be left alone. And I think it was in my second year being in office. I'm in my starting my 6th year. But I think it was in my second year, there was a state senator who tried to pass a bill that would dramatically regulate homeschoolers. And so as it passed through the committee, or went through the committee process, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of well-dressed and polite and well-spoken families, and students, young people of all ages, all throughout the Capitol building, and the bill failed. And it was a remarkable statement. So I want those of you who are here in the audience and watching at home, maybe homeschooling isn't your thing. Like Mike said, it's incredible. It's not for everybody. But maybe charter schools are your thing. Maybe parochial schools are your thing. Learn that lobbying message from what the homeschoolers do in Illinois and take that to your own state capitals. I mean, we all know that our young people need to be involved and need to learn civics. So often that is not taught anymore. But involve your kids in this. It's powerful when a constituent comes to my office, either in my district office or down in Springfield, and is well-spoken and articulate and polite, respectful, and has logical thoughts and lays out the school choice message. I was downtown, the City Club of Chicago had a forum on school choice, and I met some of the charter school students there who were well-dressed, articulate, passionate. They had a vision for where they wanted to go after graduating from high school, what they wanted to do as a career. It was impressive. It was impressive. And so my message to them and my message to all of you is have those students take a day off from work if you can. I know it's a sacrifice, but organize and come down to Springfield, because I promise you the opponents or the supporters of the status quo, they lobby. They email, they make phone calls, they make office visits. Our side needs to do the same thing.
Really quickly, the whole idea that I just pitched out there, this property tax abatement or this tuition property tax abatement for people who do homeschool or private school, that's usually a less intrusive way to get a return of taxes than it is to try and say I want a voucher or something like that, because it's basically a tax credit for something you're doing on your own. So people like it better, especially. And this is the innovation here is that it's a property tax. It's not coming out of the state coffers, but it's coming directly out of your property tax bill. Here's the funny thing, and use this on your favorite soccer mom, suburban soccer mom who likes use this on them. How do you feel about me subsidizing your kid's education? What? Yeah, because every time you homeschool and every time you send your kid to a private school, you're paying twice. So you're paying for your own child's education and you're subsidizing your neighbor's kid's education. And at the very least, you can have a little fun and make them feel guilty about it. But this is the truth. Every person who private schools or homeschools is subsidizing the existing system. So when they fight you on this return of property tax bill that hopefully Tom will file tomorrow or Monday, when they fight you on it, you can say it's only a return of subsidy, which indeed it is.
Just a quick story about my 93-year-old mother who had never paid, who always pays her taxes down there at Olympia Fields, but doesn't feel like she's never used the public school system with the four of us. The Catholic schools in the state of Illinois save the state $1.2 billion every year. So I said, when I was superintendent, we ought to go down there to the state capitol and show them that. So we had kids from all over dressed up in little uniforms. Scandalously, we are uninvited. There were too many kids and too many people. It wasn't safe. I digress.
You guys are already answering the last question already. It was, what can people in this room do to get involved and how to put pressure on state legislators to help them pass school choice? And you're kind of already starting to answer that. So if anybody else wants to take on that question.
I'll just jump in and say we've given you some ideas up here about various bills that you can call your legislator and ask about. You got to, become a precinct committeeman. The number of precincts in both parties that are unfilled, where the party will give you voter data, and you can knock on people's doors, and it's one of the most powerful public offices you can hold is to be a precinct committeeman if you run your precinct. And it's how political machines are born. It's how the Chicago political machine was built, and quite frankly, it's how the Tea Party, which was a fringe part of the GOP coalition, got so much power so quickly. So you have to become politically active. And for those of you who can, and I should use my own advice, and I have thought about it, but for those of you who can, run for office. Tom needs help down there. And when the party tells you, oh, you don't want to challenge that guy, it's like, yeah, actually I do. And this is one last thing I'll say politically, and this is a pitched political battle. It has to be won. If you're going to go the legislative route, I'm going to work on the app to absolve all of you of that work, and I'm talking to some people to try to do that. But if you're going to do this politically, when you decide to challenge somebody, you beat them. And when you beat them, you don't just sit there and go down there and say, oh, here I am, I'm going to do this. No, you go to all of your colleagues that you just are working with, that you just beat, and you hold the scalp of the guy you beat. You know, I'd carry around a briefcase and get a scalp, you know, like a wig. And you go into your friends' offices and you say, that's the scalp I took on this issue and a couple others. And you're next. And that's how you get people. That's how you get those 12 Republicans downstate who voted out a voucher bill to switch their votes.
Before you send it, when I ran for office, I beat a 12-year Republican incumbent in the primary, who was the favorite of the teachers' unions. And I ran and I said, these are my positions, these are my principles. If you like it, vote for me. If you don't, have a nice day. And we won by 8%. And Joe also beat an incumbent, so it can be done. It can be done. One other thing I wanted to recommend: the most effective way you can lobby a state representative or a state senator is a visit to their district office. I want you to go to Springfield. I want you to go to your respective state capitals. But it can be a zoo down there. There can be just a lot of crazy things going on. It's hard for people to focus. But if you're in the district office, it's a calm, quiet environment. And plus, if you bring your children along, they are less intimidated about speaking up. They can speak up, and you have more time and attention if you do it in the district office. And then ask your lawmaker where they send their own children. Because some of the highest office holders in the state of Illinois benefited from a Catholic education and yet stand in the way of school choice. So just ask them where they send their own kids.
Just one quick thing. I wanted to say thank you to the Heartland Institute. I was one of the original founding members, and it did it because of school choice in 1984. When did Heartland start? 1984?
We're just past 31 years, so this is our 32nd year.
Yeah, so we had a group, Loop Libertarians, and the Heartland Institute grew out of that, and Dave Padden, God rest his soul, who was the godfather of all this. And I was a minor donor, but I got involved first and foremost in 1984 for school choice. So it's gratifying to see, even though it's been slow, that we've had much more awareness, and thank God for the Heartland Institute. And by the way, I am running for office, so, but locally.
My last word, run for school board. Support good people on school boards, huh? U46. Run for school board and stay on top of your school board.
Yeah, and I would second. That's what we're asking our parents to do now: is visit the district offices, bring their school board members, bring people who are graduates from the school, bring their kids, and talk to the legislators at home. Because after all, they're spending most of the time at home now, anyway.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Not really.
All right, let's give all of our speakers today a great round of applause. I'm sure most of our speakers will probably stick around here and have more questions. And I just want to thank all of you for coming, all of you for watching online, and leave you with a couple of more statistics. There was a report yesterday. The achievement gap they identified in 1965, so it's been 50 years they've been trying to fix the achievement gap. A study was released yesterday. If they continue on the same pace, it is going to take 250 years to close the achievement gap. If you change the school choice and give every parent a voucher or an ESA, that gap will be closed in a matter of just a few years. So everybody remember your scarf, and if we don't get school choice, that's the way we fix education, is school choice. Thank you.